Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. Because it is the second Monday of the month, that means we are on our Mix It Up Monday hop. Be sure to check out all the info on the group and the hoppers down below. This is hosted by Peacecraft Love Facebook group, and anybody in the group is welcome to hop along. We start off with a sketch, and here's our sketch for this time around, and then we mix it up with our own mixed media. So let's dive in. All right, I have pulled these photos that were from a vacation a couple of years ago, and I'm going to be using my counterfeit kit this month, which has sort of a vacation vibe to it, but not a huge vacation vibe. So that is why I pulled out these photos. Now, I have too many photos to fit on that sketch, so I'm going to turn it into a double page layout. I'm going to keep the photos kind of in the same positions around the horizontal band that is part of that. And I'm going to emphasize that band with splitting my paper. So I've got a split page design going on today. I have pre-chosen several pieces from my counterfeit kit already because I knew I was looking for specific things. So I am putting these papers back together using the branding strips that I cut off of the paper. And the Pink Fresh Studio never has interesting branding strips. So that one is pretty easy peasy to use to glue these two split pages together, and it turns out to be pretty sturdy. Now, the other branding strip that I cut off from that wood grain piece of paper is pretty, and I am going to use it to emphasize that line in the sketch. I will just grab a scrap from my stash to do the repairs. And then as I'm thinking about my mixed media, I am inspired by this painterly sticker, and so I'm going to use that as the basis. I pulled out my Liquitex matte gel paste, and on the back of the Liquitex bottle, you get the qualities of the paste, and this one is mostly transparent, and that is going to come into play largely with what I have in mind. So I have a Vicky Bouton stencil and a scraper from scrapbook.com, and that's going to help me get my paste applied. I am going to use my photos to kind of mark out where I don't need so much paste. Now, because this paste is very lumpy and bumpy and textured, you will need to use liquid glue when attaching things on top of that, and we'll talk more about that later. All right, my stencil is not big enough to cover this whole thing, and that's not really what I want to do anyway. I'm going to pick and choose patches to cover this up with. So I did grab another spatula to help get the paste out of the tin, and then I'm going to use this scraper to spread it. Now, you know, I probably could have gotten away with that spatula, and in some cases it would have been easier just because that scraper is pretty big and I'm not doing the whole stencil. At any rate, it is what I decided to do, but I am making a little bit of a mess of it trying to keep everything organized here. The other thing I'm doing is kind of smoothing out the edges. When you're doing a partial stenciling with a thicker paste, it can have awkward leftover bits where the paste only kind of goes over the lip of a part of the stencil and it leaves kind of a harsh edge. So I'm smoothing those out with my fingers, as well as trying to rub the paste into the stencil so that it's smoother when I take the stencil off to begin with. And so those are all kind of the steps to this partial stenciling process that I use. Now, here's a little bit of a cleanup. My paste went over that lip of the paper a little bit, so I can just use the edge of my scraper to peel that back up. At any rate, I am just picking and choosing bits and pieces here, and I will go ahead and do the second page as well in the same way, and just keeping in mind the areas that I know that I need to leave open and free for certain elements like my title and my photos. While that is drying, I did take a lunch break, and when I came back, it still wasn't dry yet, so I moved on to working on my title. Now, I have to Frankenstein some letters together, and I need an R, so I'm creating that R with a P and the leg of a K. So I'm curious what your Frankensteining letter stories are. Have you done anything interesting or unusual to get your letters to work out? I don't know, this drives me crazy. At any rate, I did use my heat tool to help speed up the drying process because it still wasn't ready yet. And I am ready to move on to the next part. And this is where this mixed media comes to life. I have got a Concord and 9th brown, which is the wheat color, in my stenciling blender brush. And I am going to put some ink down into that clear drying paste. And that is where this tone-on-tone mixed media starts to pop. Now, I had gotten through some of this mixed media when I realized for this style of ink application. The blender brushes take too long because they don't hold as much ink, and that's great for smooth ink blending on other things. But for this intense ink that I need to sink down into those cracks, a blending tool like this one with the domed foam is going to be better. Now, you started using a foam tool that had white on it before, so I had to clean up my ink pad and my tools and kind of rescue that mess that I had made getting the white pigment ink contaminated onto my dye ink pad. At any rate, you saw me get through that, and I have moved on. I am sure to mask off areas of the paper that I don't want to get ink on, and I am checking my placement of my elements as I go, and I'm getting inked up on both sides, and this turned out even better than I had pictured in my mind. I really wasn't sure what color of ink I was going to use when I started this, but I like the tone on tone. Okay, so I have got some embellishment set aside here, and I did not even realize when I started this story that this little grocery sack sticker was a part of the Jen Hadfield sticker pack. And so that worked out perfectly for the story that I'm telling, because I'm talking about all of the planning and preparation that goes into a vacation kind of gets ignored along the way. So, my title, as you probably noticed, was Work Before Play. So I'm going to tell the grocery shopping story of this. Now, I had planned all along for that lower paper, which is Pink Fresh paper, had some phrases on there that I definitely wanted not to cover up, and I wanted to highlight them. So I did that with the chipboard frames because those phrases very much play along with this story. And then I am moving on to, I added my band across there, and now I need to pick and choose from these photos because there's just not enough room for all of those photos to fit how I want. And I will need to kind of tear things up and move them around a little bit to get things to fit and work out how I want them to, but I managed to get it to work. And then we can move on to the rest of the layout. Now, I believe coming up next is where I need to glue everything down. Yes, indeed. So I've got my title on this clear placement mat from scrapbook.com, and I am really liking this mat. And I can move it around and see where my title is going to go and change it up if I need to. And when I transfer my title to my layout using a piece of this mint tape, also from scrapbook.com, really helps in my title work these days. And because, like I said earlier, this is going on the lumpy bumpy texture paste, I do need to add glue, and thickers really don't stick anyway, so you should add glue to your thickers all along. Okay, because I can slightly see through that tape, I can place it with fair confidence. And I will put some pressure on those stickers while that glue dries. And I'm going to also add liquid glue to my photos, again, because there is some need to be sure that it is going to adhere to any texture paste that is under there. Now, mostly I got the texture paste around the edges, but still, I want those to be secure. All right, so with those in place, I am going to go ahead and move on to a couple of things. And I'm getting these photos on this side settled down, and I'm realizing that that final third photo is still too big. There's still too much going on there. So I will trim that down to a 3x3 photo. And that will actually allow me to kind of set it down below that butterfly strip because I didn't want to cover up all of that. I intentionally made space and time to do that. So that works out pretty well. Okay, I've revealed my title. It is sticking well. I'm going to give it just another minute before I move on. And now I'm getting to the embellishment phase. I did pre-choose a couple of things, but I'm also going to go back to my sticker sheets and stuff and bring in more elements. I wanted to emphasize that horizontal line a little bit more, and that's what that fork is helping do. Plus, it is very good to go along with the story. I realized that shopping bag would be a great element to kind of take up that nook. I purposefully offset my title from each other to create these nooks below the word before, to the left of the word before, and also above the word before. Okay, that was a lot of befores all in one sentence. At any rate, that creates some nooks for placing embellishments. And well, I wanted to cut out a lot of this embellishing. I know a lot of people struggle with embellishing. And so I'm just going to kind of ramble as you watch me go through this and talk about bits and pieces, even if that's not what's on the screen right now. But what is on the screen right now is I just put a sticker on top of a chipboard circle to cover up an element I didn't want. So that is one of the tips I use, that if the words or phrases, or if there's a part of an icon that isn't great, find a way to tuck it or cover it so that it does work for your story. And as I'm choosing my embellishments here, I am trying to focus on a couple of colors. Now, I started that with the chipboard that I put down on those phrases on the lower half of the page. I had chose green, yellow, and blue from those chipboard elements on purpose. And when I pre-chose some of the other embellishments, I was focusing on green, yellow, and blue. And then pink will come up a little bit later as I get into some of these other embellishments. Now, the sketch did have this small little grouping up in the upper left-hand corner. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that element there. And it does help balance off the overall double page spread as well, which hopefully I'll remember to talk about when we get to another part of this layout. Now, I am trying to keep a lot of my embellishments clustered along that horizontal line to help emphasize that line. And as I'm clustering my embellishments, I am trying to mix up colors, shapes, textures. I am trying to include some horizontal flow as well as some vertical flow to these. I am tucking, I am overlapping when I can. Now, some of these didn't tuck or overlap well. I am using foam dots on several of them. And with that grocery sack, I actually popped up the bottom of the sack with foam dots, but left the handle flat. So that adds like a little bit of a realistic textural dimension, a purposeful textural dimension to that. So those are some of the things that are going through my mind. And now, as I said before, I wanted to tuck embellishments around that title word. And so I got a butterfly going on up there, and then I realized that shopping bag had more space to the right of it before you hit the word, and that was kind of an awkward empty gap. So I need to fill that in with a bigger clustered embellishment. So I'm going to add a lot more bits and pieces to that so that it helps that gap that I left there on purpose make sense. I am also one of the first elements that I pulled was that van with some florals in there. So I want to make sure I've got florals going on in other places. And that definitely played into my mixed media work. I also pulled that candle element, which has gold in it, which I never intended to use on this layout to begin with. So with that gold element in there, I wanted to make sure I had a few more bits and pieces of gold. So I've got some gold greenery and some gold hearts. Just trying to make things feel cohesive and not random. Okay, here's the part where I'm talking about balance. When I put that butterfly on there, everything felt very tight and heavy to that title grouping. And it needs a little more flow off to the right. Now, I am kind of looking at some of these elements, going from the upper left-hand very corner down to the photos, up to the title, and then down to the photos again with color. So it kind of has this zigzagginess to it. So I'm trying to emphasize a little bit of that zigzag with color and texture and repeated elements. So as you see me pointing, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that zigzaggy flow. Now, I thought I was working on that butterfly section, but it looks like I stopped to tuck in a few more tiny bits and pieces around. I had some stickers from the Vicky Boutin. It was the Fernwood collection that had these teeny tiny gnome related stickers, but these make great little sprinkles to tuck in here and there. And I had been setting those aside for a long time, so I was glad I could get them to use. All right, now I am putting the very final touches on here, and this is where I'm going to extend my title flow off to the right because that upper element on the left-hand page extends the flow to the left. I want to balance it out by extending the flow to the right. And again, I'm using selective foam dots here where that butterfly has one wing lifted up with foam and the other wing is flat. And then I added a smaller element sticker up there. And then I'm going to continue that flow with the enamel dot sticker. So I'm starting off a little bit bigger and tighter towards my title. And I'm going to loosen up and spread out those elements as I move away from my title. And so that creates a natural flow and kind of an ebb to the end of those elements as well as they kind of spread out and dissipate. All right, and then I'm just tucking because I've got those peak enamel dots. That went with that little tag under the candles there to the right of that fireplace photo. And that's why I pulled in the pink. I'm finishing off these photos with something I like to do, which is to edge them with black, especially on this side of the page where everything is very tight and busy. That black helps give it just a little more space from each other. And I did purposefully have a tighter, busier right-hand page and a more calm left-hand page because it plays into that work before play feel and mood. And then I got my journaling tucked in right next to that very convenient phrase there, and that finishes this one off. All right, I will leave you with the rest of these close-up photos. I hope you got something interesting out of hearing my thought process behind all of these bits and pieces. I hope you will go check out all of the rest of the hoppers and leave them some love as well. And I think I will be back one more time this week for you. I can't quite remember. So until then, have an artful day.